This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, now I'm recording. Awesome. All right. So, okay. So, at this point, we're going to talk about what happens after we've identified our research question, after we've found all of our sources and read all of our sources thoroughly and taken all of our notes, after we've analyzed our data, after we've answered our research questions, and now we're going to put it all together. So before you start writing your research paper, you're going to look over all your notes so everything is fresh in your mind, and then spend some time thinking about these questions. Number one, what is the most important message from your research? What do you really want the reader to take away from your work? And spend some time thinking about how you will structure your paper. So to that end, you want to make sure you've identified your key arguments or topics, and you want to, your key arguments or topics you want to include, and then also what evidence you're going to present. All right, so I'm going to go over some writing tips that will make your writing pleasant to read and also easy to understand. And these tips aren't just for research papers. Most of them can be applied to any form of writing, from emails to essays. So for clarity's sake, when you're writing, avoid using filler words and giving non-relevant information. So an example of filler words you can see here on the screen. There are, there is, there were, it is, it was, that, which, and who. So for example, take a look at our example sentence here. On Halloween, there are ghosts and goblins wandering the street that ask for candy. Okay, so read this one. There we go. Now, compare the first sentence to this sentence. On Halloween, ghosts and goblins wander the street and ask for candy. So which one of those sentences seems more clear to you guys? The first one or the second one? Yeah, I agree. I think the second one is much more clear. So we left off there are and that, and we got to our point a lot more quickly. Okay, so our next writing tip is simplicity. You want to keep your sentence structure simple and direct. So it's usually better to have 2 sentences or 3 sentences. That's typically better than one long sentence. So let's look at our super long sentence here. Literally, sustainable development refers to maintaining development over time, although by the early 1990s, more than 70 definitions of sustainable development were in circulation, definitions that are important despite their number because they are the basis on which the means for achieving sustainable development in the future can be built. Wow, that is a lot of information in one sentence. So let's break it up into a few more sentences. So our first sentence, literally, sustainable development refers to maintaining development over time. Then, However, by the early 1990s, more than 70 definitions of sustainable development were in circulation. And then our last sentence, despite their number, these definitions are important because they are the basis on which the means for achieving sustainable development in the future can be built. So what do you guys think? Do you think that our main super long sentence is better, or do you think it's better to break it up into 3 smaller sentences? Yeah, having that little break in the middle makes such a difference just in terms of following the content. It's much easier to follow the content when it's broken up. So if you have a really complicated sentence in your research paper, your reader is going to have to read it a few times to understand the point. And, once you guys start doing research, you're going to realize that an easy paper to read is such a relief because you can figure out what information you want from it very quickly, and you don't have to read a sentence over and over and over again. Time is important, right? Okay, so let's look at our next writing tip. Okay, so you want to avoid being redundant. So let's look at the first sentence. Which part of this sentence is redundant? And redundant just means repetitive. Exactly. Twins already means two, right? So it would be more appropriate just to say Mary is having twins. Okay, let's look at our second sentence. The store closes at 12 o'clock midnight. So which words in this sentence are redundant? Exactly. You can say the store closes at 12 o'clock, or you can say the store closes at midnight, but there's no need to say 12 o'clock midnight. You don't have to say both. All right, next sentence. Your abstract is a brief summary of your paper. So what part of this sentence is redundant? Exactly, yep. Brief is redundant because summaries are already brief, right? So it would be most appropriate to say your abstract is a summary of your paper. All right, and let's look at our last sentence here. There is a total of 14 students. So this one's a little tricky. Which word do you think is redundant here? It's total. Yeah, exactly. It's total. Because 14 is a total, right? So it's more efficient to say there are 14 students. Exactly. Yes, there are 14 students. Good job, guys. All right, let's move on to our next writing tip. Okay, so you want to avoid writing in a passive voice. And a passive voice is when you put the subject at the end of the sentence. So let's look at our first set of sentences. The first sentence here, pumpkin spice lattes are loved by Miss Shalise. And then our second sentence is, Miss Shalise loves pumpkin spice lattes. So which one sounds better to you guys? Sentence 1 or sentence 2? The second one. Exactly. So the first sentence is an example of passive voice. The subject, Miss Shalise, is at the end of the sentence. So you have to get to the very end before you realize what we're talking about. All right, so let's look at another set. The mailman is disliked by dogs, or dogs do not like the mailman. Which one sounds better? Sentence 1 or sentence 2? Yeah, sentence 2, absolutely, right? Because again, we put the subject at the end of the sentence. And really, the mailman is disliked by dogs doesn't sound that bad. But in a research paper, it's very important to just be crystal clear about your point. So if you're writing a research paper, we want to avoid passive voice. and go with the second option. All right, and now we're going to look at one more. The books were shelved by the librarian, or the librarian shelved the books. What do you guys think? Sentence 1 or sentence 2 for this one? Yeah, absolutely. We said it with fewer words too. The librarian shelved the books. So it's confusing to read passive voice, but it's not a total no-no. Passive voice can be used sparingly, but chances are there is a better way to say what you're trying to say, and especially in a research paper. All right, so our next writing tip. Exactly, Braylon. Yeah, it shouldn't be used all the time. It's more appropriate for creative writing. A lot of people use passive voice in creative writing, but in research papers, we just want to get to the point as quickly as possible. All right, so our next writing tip. In most academic writing, but definitely in research papers, you want to use what is called objective writing. Have any of you heard the phrase objective writing before? Yes, okay, good. Maybe, okay. Well, I'm going to give you an example. So in objective writing, you are avoiding referring to yourself. So you don't want to use personal pronouns like I, me, or my when you're writing your research paper. And the reason is because your argument is going to sound more confident if you are presenting it as a statement rather than an opinion. So let's look at our first example. In my opinion, Huntsville's suffrage movement excluded working class women. Or our second sentence, Huntsville's suffrage movement excluded working class women. So which one of those sentences sounds more confident? The first one or the second one? Exactly, yeah, the second one. If you say, in my opinion, it automatically discredits what you're saying. Okay, so the second point I want to make about objective writing is you want to avoid using you to refer to the audience. So let's look at the first sentence. You may not realize how few rights women had before the progressive era, or many do not realize how few rights women had before the progressive era. Now, I wouldn't say that you sounds bad necessarily. It's just not objective. So we want to go with more objective words. Yeah, exactly. We would rather use the second sentence in a research paper. Absolutely. And then my last writing tip for today is if you are able to have someone edit your paper before you turn it in. When I write something, and I write all the time, but I always ask Miss Heather to look it over because a second person can see things that you can't see because you've been staring at it and working on it for probably what feels like forever. So whenever you have another person look over your paper, they're going to see something that you didn't think of, and they're going to have an idea that you didn't think of. Okay, exactly, Braylon. Now, do you all have, before I move on, do you all have any questions about these writing tips? Not at all, okay. Nope, okay, great. All right, so on to the next topic. We're gonna look at how to structure your paper. Now, the structure of your paper it's going to vary based on what type of paper you're writing and what style you're using. But this is the information listed on the slide is a good basic outline for a research paper. And y'all remember in the first class when we talked about coming up with a research plan, right? We listed our research question. We listed our important background information. We listed our aims, right? So what points we wanted to prove in our paper. what points we wanted to make, and then we listed the resources we've consulted thus far. So we'll use our research plan as an outline. It's going to be a blueprint for our paper. But first, you want to look over your research and make sure that your research question and aims haven't changed through the course of your research. My first example from the very first class, I think you all were in the first class, I was using a prohibition argument. And then for this class, I was going to flesh that out a little bit more, and I was going to use it for my example paper, which you guys are going to see here in a minute. But my thesis was entirely incorrect. Initially, I said that prohibition laws in Huntsville caused an alcohol-related increase in crime. And that, in fact, was not true. Alabama was already, the whole state was completely dry and had been for years before prohibition went through. So all this to say that you want to make sure that your aims haven't changed through the course of your research, because they do. And so you may have to rework your research plan a little bit before you start writing your paper. Okay, so now we're going to look at a sample research paper. All right, so I wrote this just for you all. So I have written this first page of a research paper in MLA format. So you can see my font is set to 12 points. And your font needs to be, for MLA, it needs to be legible. So I chose Calibri. You can use Times New Roman or Arial, something like that. Just don't write your research paper in wingdings. We have, my paper margins are set to 1 inch. And you can see I have a header up at the top that numbers all the pages consecutively. And my last name is in the header according to MLA guidelines. MLA also asks that you put your name, your professor's name, your class name, and the date that you're writing your paper. And then MLA also asks for a title. So this is the title of my paper. And your two main goals in writing a title are to draw the reader in, right? You want it to be an interesting title. And I will tell you guys, I am the worst at writing titles. I always have to get Miss Heather to help me make my titles more interesting. And this one, as you can see, is not very interesting either. So I'm sure you all will do a much better job writing titles than me. But this part, tell them what you're writing about. So you want it to be interesting. You want to tell them what you're writing about. I'm good at telling them what I'm writing about. I'm not good at making it interesting. So here's my title. And then this is my introductory paragraph. So your introductory paragraph, of course, is introducing your topic. So you want to give background information, and then you want to lay out your main arguments that you're going to focus on in your paper. Your thesis statement is often the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. And I'm actually going to show you guys, I'm going to break down an introductory paragraph for you, sentence by sentence. But first, I'm going to finish talking about the elements of a research paper. Okay, so the next element is a heading. Headings are optional, but they can be really helpful to the reader because they break your paper up into logical sections. Likewise, when you are reading scholarly articles for your own research, you'll find that headings are really helpful to quickly find the information that is relevant to your own research. When I was in school for my master's degree, I was reading tons and tons of research, and I couldn't read it all word for word. You have to skim a little bit, and you have to find the parts of the paper that are really important to you. So headings help with that. So coming up with headings can also help you figure out how to organize your points, how to organize the points that you're going to lay out in your paper. So they can be useful both for the reader and for you. So I might begin the body of my paper with the header Suffrage in Huntsville, 1894 to 1901. And then my next section might be Suffrage in Birmingham, 1911 to 1916. I might have a heading like child labor. So you want your headings to be brief and descriptive. There are formatting rules for headings, so make sure that you're following your writing style's rules. For MLA, they want your heading to be in bold, as you can see here with mine, and they want it to actually be a different font than the font that your paper is written in. And that's just so it's easy to see, oh, this is a heading and what the heading is about. They catch your eye. Next, body paragraphs. So body paragraphs, as the name implies, are going to make up the body of your paper. And this is where you're going to lay out all of your arguments to support your thesis. Body paragraphs will often transition from one paragraph to the next, giving your paper a nice flow. So for example, if the last sentence of my paragraph is about how laws in Alabama prior to the Progressive Era did not protect the working class, then the beginning of my next paragraph might be laborers themselves often did not support labor reform. So I'm still on the topic of laborers and labor laws, but I'm set up to make a different point, a whole new point in my next paragraph. So that's kind of where a flow comes in your paper. You want your paragraphs to connect somehow. And then, you know, when you move from a different heading, right, from heading to heading, then your paragraphs don't necessarily have to have flow. And they won't necessarily always. It's just something to think about while you're writing. And we are going to look closer at a body paragraph, but at their most basic, they will have a topic sentence. They're going to have evidence to support your topic sentence, to support your claim. And then they're going to have, you're going to explain your evidence, and then you're going to have a brief wrap-up sentence just to summarize your main point. Your paper will have a conclusion, and the conclusion is going to be between 1 and 3 paragraphs, depending on how long your paper is. And it just wraps up what you've been discussing in your paper. You can hit on the main points again and explain how you've answered your research question. But remember, you're not introducing new information in your conclusion paragraph. You're just hitting the highlights of what you've already talked about in your paper. Your conclusion paragraph should leave the reader with no doubt where you stand on your topic. And then last but not least, you want to dedicate a new page to your works cited page where you're going to list your sources according to your chosen style. Now, I know I just gave you a lot of information. Do you all have any questions about that before I move on? Okay. I don't think so. Okay. All right, cool. All right, so let's look at a introductory paragraph, sentence by sentence. Okay. So my first sentence, in the late 1800s, women's suffrage was considered radical and unfeminine by many male and female citizens in Alabama. So this sentence is meant to introduce, it is, ooh, sorry, I got my papers mixed up. Here we go. All right. It's okay. So the first sentence is actually just an interesting fact about suffrage in Alabama. And this sentence is actually just meant to draw the reader in and get them excited about the topic. So this is just an interesting factoid. Now let's look at my second sentence. This is where I start providing background information. So it says, despite this negative perception, the suffrage movement in Huntsville began in 1894 with the formation of the Huntsville League for Women's Suffrage by a small group of upper-class white women. Okay, so that's sentence 2. We're just giving background information. Sentence 3, I'm giving more background information. So it says, later on, many of these same women formed a second league, the Huntsville Equal Suffrage Association. And now in my next sentence, they fought to secure the vote for women in Alabama while still observing classist social norms and ignoring working class issues. So in this sentence, I'm defining suffrage as the right to vote for women. And I am also laying out my main argument that they observed social norms and classism and then ignored working class issues. Okay. My fifth sentence is giving more background information. By 1911, the Birmingham Equal Suffrage Association was formed, with Birmingham suffragists leading the fight to enfranchise women in Alabama. So that's just more important background information. And now I'm leading into my second main point, which is that the Birmingham group approached suffrage differently than Huntsville suffragists by focusing on social inequities such as poor working conditions and child labor. So I am, with this sentence, I'm setting up kind of the structure of my paper as well. I'm going to be comparing the two suffrage associations and the work that they did. And then the last sentence, the women's suffrage movement in Huntsville differs from the suffrage movement in Birmingham because Huntsville suffragists were motivated less by using the right to vote to improve the lives of the working class and more by securing political and legal autonomy for upper class women. So that sentence is my thesis. Do you guys have any questions about that? About how to structure an introductory paragraph? It's not always going to be exactly this way. It may be shorter, it may be longer, but you're still going to have the basic elements of giving background information, of laying out your arguments, and then you're going to introduce your thesis. Okay, now let's look at a body paragraph. All right, so this first sentence, Huntsville suffragists did not prioritize and even ignored issues affecting the working class. So that is my topic sentence, and it's introducing the idea that I'm going to explore in the paragraph. The next sentence, written in the September 13th, 1913 meeting minutes of the Huntsville Equal Suffrage Association, is an account of a letter to suffragist Ella Lee Chapman Humes from Miss Thomas Owen, asking for support to form a chapter of the Southern Industrial Congress in North Alabama for the education and uplift of poor white people. So this is where I'm laying out my evidence, and then in the next sentence, I continue to lay out my evidence. So it says, according to the minutes, Humes' response is, so long as this work did not oppose women's suffrage, she would do her best to forward the movement. And then moving on to the next sentence, Humes' response indicates the noble cause of educating and uplifting the working class is not a priority to her. So I am explaining how my evidence supports my topic. And then in the next sentence, again, I'm going to be further explaining how my evidence supports my topic. So this is the only example of Huntsville suffrage organization discussing issues affecting Huntsville's working class. And then my last sentence, the meeting minutes are a summary of the actions taken by the Huntsville Equal Suffrage Association and a thorough examination shows that Huntsville suffragists did not take action to uplift the working class in their community. So that's my closing sentence, and as you can see, it summarizes my point and brings the reader's attention back to my main point. So your body paragraph is not always going to look exactly like this one, but it should have this basic layout where you have your topic sentence, and then you lay out your evidence to support the topic, and then you explain your evidence, and then you summarize the paragraph. Are there any questions about a body paragraph? Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of class today. We really, Heather and I both have really enjoyed doing this class with you all. You've been such an awesome group to work with, and I would love to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to use your microphone if it's kind of a complicated question. So I'll open the floor to questions. Okay, so first question is, how long did it take you to write your research paper? Ooh, you know, you get better at it as you go along, but your first ones will take a while. I would say to carve out at least a weekend of, dedicated spending several hours on it. And that's just the writing part. The research part takes time too. It is a big project. So definitely it's going to be important when you're working on a research paper to manage your time really well. Try not to leave it to the last minute. And then also try to make time to have somebody look it over before you do your final draft. They are a big project. I would say you would want to start working on it several weeks in advance of when it's due, and then leave yourself a good long weekend to work on putting everything together, just depending on how used you are to writing. And that can be the hard part, is just figuring out what to say and how to say it and everything. Any other questions? Well, I have a question for you guys. What type of research do you think you're going to want to do in the future? Do you think you'll write about social topics, or do you think you'll write about history? What are your interests? Okay, so Braylon asks, did I write any other research papers? I've written quite a few research papers in my time. I had a large research paper that I wrote for my undergraduate degree, which was in art history. And we wrote a lot of smaller research papers as well. So that paper ended up being about 20 pages. But we wrote a lot of smaller papers as well for that degree. And for my master's degree, I had to write several research papers then as well. Now I do still write research papers in my career on history for like history publications, but mostly I do like shorter essays in my career now. Technology, that's an interesting topic. Absolutely. Do you know what career you're hoping to go into? Oh, puppy training. Oh my goodness, that sounds like the most amazing career ever. That would be that's a good backup career for me if being a librarian doesn't work out. I do love puppies. My mom's a dog trainer, actually. She trains her dog on how to do nose work. So like how to use scent to find things and how to track scent. Ooh, mechanical engineering. That's awesome. Or law. That's good too. Both of those will be very challenging but rewarding degrees. All right. Do you guys have any other questions about research or anything that we've covered in class? Not from Braylon. Okay. Well, you guys are always welcome to contact me or Miss Heather. We'd love to hear from you. If you ever have any questions, if you're working on an assignment and you need some help, give us a call, email us. You can even come by the library. We can set up an appointment. If you need somebody to look over your research paper, we would be happy to do that. Oh, this is a good question. What is an archivist? Well, we have here at the library, we have a local history archive. And I'll turn my camera on so you can see it in the background. I'm sitting in the archive right now. Turn off my screen share. All right, so can you see the archive back there? All those boxes and stuff? Yeah. So my job here at the library is to preserve this historical material. So these are original items, historical correspondence, we have artifacts, we have ledgers, and they date back to the early 1800s. So my job is to preserve them, so to make sure that they don't get damaged. And my job is to help people research with them. So if somebody is researching a topic in Huntsville history, I will go through my catalog of the archives and I will pull items for them to look at that might help their research. It's a really cool job. It might be the coolest job in the library. I think it might be the coolest job in the library. I learn something new every day and I discover something new every day in this archive. It is very cool. So if you all ever want to come by and have a tour, I would be happy to give you a tour as well. The ones in the background are, that's our rare books collection. And some of them are actually one of a kinds. A lot of them are first editions. We also have people like local history books that there were limited prints of, so we'll have copies of those. Many of them are signed by the author. And a lot of them are really, really old. Some of them are up to 200 years old. Yeah, it's some of them are worth a good bit of money. We haven't had them all appraised, but yeah, a lot of them are worth money. We don't buy them though. They've been donated to the library over the years. Almost everything in our archive has been donated to the library. How much? I had, yeah, we don't sell them, no. There are a lot of rules around taking anything out of the archives. It's part of so by that I mean giving it away or selling it or throwing it away or anything like that. We have something of an agreement with the community that we are going to be guardians of the historical information. And so we're going to keep it here in the archive for the foreseeable future. So yeah, we don't sell anything. But we will make copies of things and, let people use images of it in their work, their research and stuff. But yeah, so Braylon asked how much. Well, I had one appraised for a couple of $100s. It was not a first edition though. So, we do definitely have some things that are probably worth more, like $400 or $500. We also have, if you can see, some artwork back here on the walls. Let's see if I can. Oh, my little camera's falling off. Some of those portraits back there are pretty old. They're from like 1823. Yep, we've got several portraits. We have historic portraits hanging out in the heritage or in the special collections department as well. How big is the room? It probably looks bigger on camera than it is. It goes back this way a little bit more, and it goes back this way a good bit more, but it's not like a huge room. I don't remember the exact square footage. I figured it out, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. What kind of artwork is it? Well, we have mostly portraits. Portraits were a big thing back in the early 1800s before photography. So it was very fashionable to commission portraits. Um, we also had a local artist named Howard Whedon, and she painted different kinds of scenes. She was painting in the late 1800s, early 1900s. We have several of her art pieces. They aren't exactly portraits, they're like copies of works done by master painters. And then we have a lot of photographs. We have one battle scene painting, but yeah, mostly portraits in here. And then I got a question, are there secret things we can't see? And that is a really good question. We do have one collection right now that is what we call restricted access. It is a person's, in the community, her private journals from her whole life. And she asked us to keep them closed to the public until after she passes away. So, so those are secret things that only myself and Miss Heather can look at right now until she either lifts the restricted access clause or passes away. There are some things that you might not necessarily want to see in here, but I would show them to you anyway. Like we do have a dried up umbilical cord as part of a collection. It took me a while to figure out what it is. I performed a lot of very unscientific experiments on it, including sniffing it and, you know, everything sort of putting it in my mouth to figure out what it was. Yeah, I was pretty disturbed when I found out what it actually was. Yeah. Oh, you're so welcome. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it so much. And we are going to have more classes. We're hoping to do an essay writing class as well. So keep an eye out for that. You're so welcome. I'm so glad you all came to class. Thank you so much. Yep, it sure is, Braylon. Unless you have any more questions, you guys are free to go. Bye. Have a good day. Thank you.